Hello, and welcome to my channel, The Practical ID, where I teach you useful tips for instructional design. There's no doubt in today's world, corporate America is keeping diversity, equity, and inclusion at the top of their list of priorities, whether they are incorporating it in performance goals or creating employee resource groups. All successful corporations have made an effort to ramp up their diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DE&I initiatives recently. What does this mean to you as an instructional design, and why should you worry about it? Well, the bottom line is if you're not incorporating some basic DE&I principles while creating your training, you're missing out on making an impactful training that everyone will pay attention to. Today, I will walk through 7 tips that can have a profound impact on making your training inclusive and harbor belongingness in your audience. Let's start with what is DE&I. DE&I at an organization outlines the principles, policies, and programs that organization has in place to promote representation and an environment of belonging to all its employees regardless of their race, religion, gender, sexual identity, and orientation, age, disability, and any other differences. DE&I ensures that everyone feels welcomed, respected, and valued. So just why is DE&I so important? After the George Floyd incident and Black Lives Movement in 2020, many companies have made an effort to promote DE&I initiatives in their organizations. Creating a work environment where everyone is welcome, respected, valued, and appreciated creates a sense of belonging. An employee can then be free to bring their whole authentic selves to work rather than leaving a part of their identity behind at home. For example, if a gay man has to stay closeted at work, he will expend a lot of energy concealing this part of his identity. He may not be able to contribute 100% of his capability because he has to worry about not revealing his sexual orientation. Wouldn't it be better if instead of expending energy at concealing his identity, he could use it to be more productive and creative? If he were accepted and felt a sense of belonging, he could perform at his full capacity. This concept plays out at a much larger and deeper level when people from all different backgrounds, beliefs, and experiences come together under one organization. Having a diverse work group also promotes creativity, inventive problem solving, boosts employee morale, and therefore productivity, resulting in overall increased profits for the company and a good reputation and brand. With all the benefits associated with DE&I, it's downright expensive for an organization to ignore DE&I, and also not the right thing to do. With that, let's get started. Tip number 1. Use diverse stock images in your training. Now, this does not mean just racial and ethnic diversity or gender diversity, but also age, religion, disability, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic status. For example, use an image where an employee is in a wheelchair and is collaborating with one who's standing or sitting. A woman in a headscarf or an African American woman in a manager or supervisor position. If your training is only showing images of a white man as manager and woman in admin roles, then you have a problem. Now, if this is actually the case in your organization and you're using actual pictures as opposed to stock pictures, don't Photoshop or fudge your pictures. In that case, perhaps your training will bring light to the need for diversity in your organization. Tip number 2, make your presentation visually clear. Many folks have issues reading at a distance and use contact lenses or glasses. After the age of 40, humans have a hard time reading up close. Consider the fact that 5 to 8% men and 0.5 to 1% women are colorblind in America. So there's a good chance you'll have someone in your audience that has difficulties reading a slide. Wouldn't it be better to use a large font with a color that strongly contrasts with the background versus colors that are hard to read? I have seen many slides in my lifetime where in addition to crowded slides, the font is highlighted or is in a strange color that does not stand out from the background. I've seen charts being used with tiny little fonts that really nobody can read, much less a person with a visual disability. So this can make a slide very difficult to read, especially for a visually impaired person. So pay attention and make your presentation visually clear. Tip number 3. You could also have visually impaired folks in your audience that may not be able to see your presentation at all or very little. If you're not presenting live, consider recording a narration to help. Identify images by saying, "Here, an image of XYZ is presented, which tells us so and so." This way, a person who's visually impaired can follow along. Tip number 4. On the flip side, someone in your audience could be hearing impaired. Consider adding closed captioning to your presentation or e-learning, which is not hard to do. This can make a world of a difference to someone who is hearing impaired. I can speak for this personally, as my mother, while not deaf, is severely hearing impaired, and the only way she can follow along a Netflix show is by reading the subtitles. Tip number 5. Make sure you are using inclusive language in your presentation. Avoid using he all the time or using he for managerial positions and she for admin or remedial positions. Unfortunately, there is considerable bias built in the English language already. For example, words like strong, competitive, manpower, and workmen are biased towards men. Make sure you're not using language that is excluding a group. Consider this example. Your presentation is for software and you're using sentences such as, "Once the user goes through the demo, he will understand how the software works." By using such sentences, you're immediately sending a message that this software is for men only, or that women are not smart enough to grasp the technology of the software. A remedy for this situation is to use gender-neutral terms, such as they, or rewrite the sentences so you don't need to identify a gender. For example, once you go through this demo, you will understand how to use the software. Another point to take into consideration here is the use of metaphors or common sayings that may not be understood by all. Saying things such as red herring, apple of my eye, melting pot, couch potato, etc. can be very confusing for someone who does not come from an American culture. Be aware of your unconscious bias, as it can come through in what you say. Tip number 6. Offer translations in your training if possible. If you work for a large corporation that has offices in global locations, it may be important that your training is translated in a different language or several different languages. You may need to work with other resources at your organization to deliver a training like this. Tip number 7. Include inclusive scenarios in your training. I remember as an elementary age kid, I was working on a math problem that went something like this. You're traveling at a speed of 25 miles per hour in your boat, heading towards a beautiful island. Your friend is driving his boat at a speed of 10 miles per hour, heading towards the same island but from the opposite direction. You both started 10 miles away from the island. How much faster will you get there? Since I had never owned a boat or even been on a boat in my life, nor did I know anyone who did, much less be friends with them, I had a hard time understanding the problem. However, if my family did own a boat and I frequently took trips on the boat, I would have been able to visualize this problem and grasp what it was asking. This is a simple example, but I hope it demonstrates the importance of using inclusive scenarios that can be universally understood. Another important point is that you make sure you're not stereotyping any groups. For example, showing men as leaders, aggressive, competitive, and women as non-leaders, passive and nurturing. Showing Caucasian people in positions of leadership and people of color as followers. Avoid this to make an inclusive training. Now that you know some basic principles of incorporating DE&I in your training, think back to the training you created in the past that may need to be revisited and updated. Incorporating these basic principles will get you off to a good start in creating a presentation that will foster a feeling of belonging to all groups. I'm personally constantly assessing my personal and conscious biases to ensure that I'm not being offensive to a group or making a group feel excluded. Maya Angelou said, "We should all know that diversity makes for a rich tapestry, and we must understand that all the threads of the tapestry are equal in value no matter what their color." Make a commitment to DE&I today. Please like, subscribe, and comment. I love hearing from you. What topics would you like to see videos on? For more resources and lots of awesome freebies, go to my website, www.thepracticalid.com. Thank you.